By the late 19th century, the British Empire had officially turned its back on chattel slavery. The era of overt human trafficking was supposed to be over. At the same time, the Australian province of Queensland was undergoing a massive economic boom, driven almost entirely by the sugar industry. Here was the planter's dilemma. Harvesting sugarcane requires brutal 12-hour days in sweltering conditions, but they could no longer legally purchase enslaved people to do the work. To keep their massive sugar empire from collapsing, the planters needed a legal loophole to acquire incredibly cheap human labor. When Mark Twain passed through the Pacific on a global lecture tour, he recorded the mechanics of this exact loophole in his travel diaries. He observed a government-sanctioned system known as recruiting, or the labor traffic, a method of importing Pacific Islanders to Australian shores. The core trick of the system was simple. The planters didn't need to literally own a human being to extract their labor. They just needed a legally binding agreement. The 19th-century employment contract was weaponized to do the exact same job as an iron shackle. This ledger reveals how the empire priced a human life. Upfront costs included £20 to a captain to catch the worker, plus a £3 government fee. On the back end, a £5 return deposit and a £25 wage for 3 years of labor. For roughly $100 a year, a planter secured total operational control over another person. To get these workers on the boats, recruiters sailed to Pacific Islands with a compelling pitch. Sign a Queensland contract, and you will acquire modern civilization and luxury goods to bring home. Missionary accounts from the islands recorded the reality of what actually came back. Islanders returned with broken Waterbury watches, stiff collars worn as leg ornaments, a cheap umbrella, a simple necklace, and a vocabulary of swear words. 3 years of brutal physical extraction in the hot cane fields were traded for a handful of perishable trinkets. Now, Queensland did have protective laws on the books. Cast iron regulations required recruiters to let an islander go free if they changed their mind and jumped off the ship. But recruiters found a physical workaround. When a recruit jumped overboard, a rowboat would pull ahead and block their path to shore. They would pace the swimmer, constantly cutting them off, until the person was completely drained of energy and starting to sink. The exhausted, drowning islander would eventually haul themselves into the boat. And on paper, government inspectors could legally categorize the kidnapping as a voluntary boarding. If the islander gains almost nothing from this contract, who actually absorbs the hidden deficit of a massive trade? The true cost of the Queensland labor traffic was paid in human lives. This visualization shows the lethal toll on every 1,000 new recruits. Within their first 6 months, 180 died. Compare that to their native homes. 12 per 1,000 died in peace, and 15 per 1,000 during tribal wars. The civilizing agricultural labor of the British Empire was 12 times more deadly to the islanders than indigenous warfare. Prominent thinkers of the era published grand prophecies, claiming the Anglo-Saxon race was bringing humane improvement to the Pacific. The Queensland labor traffic proved that these civilizing missions were often violent atrocities, carefully sanitized behind a veil of bureaucratic paperwork and tidy ledgers. When a society formally outlaws an atrocity like slavery, the exploiters do not disappear. They simply invent new legal contracts.